Hi, this is Lisa Grant for Hase and Ghostmaster. Welcome to the 8th and last part of the video theory series, Crushing nl50. The title of this video is Look Out, and as I said in the previous video, I'd like to touch on some further concepts during this video. I just want to give you guys some further ideas, but I don't want to explain these concepts in every detail, if that was actually possible, therefore I'll just touch on these topics. So basically application, examples and some further thoughts. There's not much more in this video. Okay, I suggest we start with squeezes and squeeze induction. I guess we've mentioned squeezes in an earlier video, so just a quick recap. A squeeze is a 3-bet of an opponent's raise after his raise already has been called at least once, and just like in every other situation, you can basically bluff 3-bet or 3-bet for value. We've already talked about value 3-betting and what you should take into account when doing so. Therefore, I would rather like to focus on bluff squeezes now. A quite profitable move in many different situations. Of course, there's always a lot which you should take into account when trying to make a bluff squeeze. The most important things you should take into account are actually the initial aggressor and the last caller. Regarding these, there are some criteria which simply oppose a bluff squeeze. For instance, you shouldn't try to squeeze if the last caller is a calling station, even if the initial aggressor might fold very often. Simply because the calling station will call your squeeze much too often, and we won't be able to win major pots against him with a hand which initially was meant to be a bluff. Basically, the same principles for a bluff have to be applied here too. We want to bluff, and when you're in a situation in which you can't bluff your opponent, you shouldn't try to do so, and calling stations are really hard to bluff. It's much easier to bluff someone who is also able to fold. For instance, nits and tags, or just tight players in general. Especially the cold calling range against an open raise of most tags won't be balanced very often, because most of the time very strong hands will be missing, since they would 3-bet these hands for value, and therefore you can extract most of the strong hands when trying to squeeze against such a player because he would have 3-bet with them. Of course, when your squeeze attempt is very obvious, it could happen that such an opponent decides to make a hero play with a hand with which he usually wouldn't go all in. For instance, with pocket nines, with which he didn't 3-bet pre-flop, but with which he decides to go all in after your squeeze. So that he plays cold call push. However, most of the time tags will have to fold a lot of hands very often, and therefore they are usually a very good victim. Similar criteria has to be taken into account regarding the initial aggressor. He should be able to fold a hand too. He shouldn't be a fish who doesn't recognise the fake length of our move, and also shouldn't be too paranoid about being bluffed, because it's likely that a thinking player will wonder in such a situation if he's being bluffed, since it's a squeeze situation. Of course, it won't be a bluff all the time. Often we will just have a strong hand. However, you shouldn't try to bluff squeeze against a paranoid player who is afraid of being bluffed most of the time and who